Oh, hi. Uh, I'm not going to waste a lot of your time today because I want to make sure I tell you about this book before the coffee gets cold. Welcome back to Paper Pages and Possibilities. I am so glad to have you here today, and I am here to tell you about the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold. This is by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I finished this a week or two ago, and I've been kind of mulling on the story ever since, and here are my thoughts. So, what we have in this story are a series of vignettes, and there's a total of four, and each vignette is the story of someone who is dealing with a tragedy and wanting to do something about it. And the way I see it, the stakes kind of raise with each consecutive story. The first one starts with a pair of lovers, and it's whether they're stay together or not. And then we go up to a mother and daughter situation, and then we go to a life and death situation. So, yeah, it gets progressively more impactful. So, the main premise of this story is it's about a coffee shop where it has this one particular chair that has a magic to it, but it's not just a chair, it's a ritual that you do when you are sitting in the chair, and that is the pouring of and drinking of a cup of coffee. And what happens is once the coffee is poured, you get transported back into time, the place of your choosing. You have to have it in your head where you want to go. And you are able to be in that moment for as long as the coffee stays warm. So it usually just allows for like one conversation, and one conversation that they would do differently than they did the first time around. That's most of the time what happens. And what I found is that while these people go back, they feel this urge to go back and like they can still make a difference in changing somehow the future. They are told explicitly up front, you can go back to the past, you can stay there until the coffee gets cold, you can't leave the chair, but you also cannot, whatever you do will not change the future. People, understanding that, I think end up finding a new sense of purpose or a sense of resolution when they do this travel back in time and have this coffee with a loved one. Each one seems to come back to the present with either a newfound sense of purpose or a new realization that helps them figure out how to move forward with their life. Whether it being making changes right then and there in how they treat their loved ones or in what they say to the loved ones. And just, it really sparks a lot of thought on living in the present. We can't go back to the past, we can't change the past, but we can change what we do starting this moment. And I think that's the key thought with this book is no matter what happens in the past, the future starts right now. So I really enjoyed the story. There's a lot of character development. Each person who sits in the chair comes back a changed person. They do have a realization that changes how they live. And the setting is it all takes place in this coffee shop, which was really interesting. And then I read in the book, um, actually on the dust jacket, I think. Yes, this actually started out not as a book but as a play. And I thought that was really fascinating, but it actually makes a lot of sense as to why the book is the way it is in terms of it only stays in the coffee shop. So the play would only have necessarily one setting. And I thought that was interesting. And also, I think gives a reason for the stories, the vignettes told in the way that they are. There's this overarching, this is a day in the life of the coffee shop, but it's like 4 acts of a play. I wasn't sure at first whether I liked this book or not, but the more that it sits with me, the more meaningful it is. So it's one of those that takes some time to think about, and it's stuck with me. So while it's not a 5 star, it is still a good book, and for the amount of time, like it is just over, oh, actually, it's 270 something pages. It's a very fast read, definitely worth your time. I know this gets lumped into like cozy fiction, but I'm not sure I would say that it is cozy fiction because it does go fairly in depth into the emotions of people who are going through very traumatic times in their lives. So, in that sense, it's not quite cozy, but it's contemplative. It gives you a sense of learning something new, giving a new perspective on how to look at life. So, still recommend, even though I wouldn't put it in cozy. So, that's my 2 cents. So, that is the book Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And while we only have a short time left, my coffee is a little lukewarm. I do want to ask you if you had a chance to go back into some time in the past and have a cup of coffee with a loved one, who would you go back to meet and what would you talk about? I would love to hear your responses in the comments. For myself, I would love to go back in the past and have a cup of coffee with my dad, who passed away when I was 17, and I take a lot after him. I would love to learn so much more about who he was as a person, his interests, his who he was as a individual outside of being my father. So that's who I would want to have the conversation with. Please leave me a note below. I would love to hear who you would have the conversation with. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you for taking the time to share with me in this delightful little book. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.